Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of the FPL Wire, powered by DreamSetGo. I'm your host, Zopha, and I'm joined, as always, by my co host, Late Riser. How was the game week, LR?
Oh, it was a little painful. I got 46 points. There was some emotions being felt on Saturday, watching your boy Timo Werner scuffing chance after chance. What could have been? I was so excited. I've been traveling for the past few weeks. This was one empty Saturday that I had. I had a lot of players playing on Saturday. So I saw Timo do what he was doing. I saw Jesus block De Bruyne's goal, who I just brought in. So it just didn't work out. But if you really have to think about the process, I made some good decisions in terms of Werner was a good captaincy decision in terms of how he ended up playing and how the game panned out, and I ended up starting ailing ahead of Target, which wasn't a very popular call, but I think backing against Arsenal for a clean sheet is one of the most odds-on things to do right now. So yeah, I was happy with how that turned out, and hoping that City finally gain form and I'm able to make some. I'm able to climb up the table. How was your week? Wildcard week.
60 points, solid but not spectacular, but all the differentials are really in play next week. Double City defense, De Bruyne, Vardy. So I hope that's when I can really kick on. So we also have with us Fantasy Football Scout's deputy editor, Neale, also known as Conto Riga, a brilliant writer who also handles the team news updates. He's also a competent fantasy manager who has been playing the game since 2006, finishing in the top 50k in 9 of those 14 seasons. We are glad to have you on, Neale. How's it going?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate it. I mean, there's a wealth of options you could have on far better managers than me, but hopefully, yeah, I can tell you a bit about Fantasy Football Scout and what I do and my past record and things like that today. But yeah, Game Week 9 was decent. I mean, 70 points, you could take that most weeks. As usual, glass half full. I'm looking at what I should have done and the points I've missed out. Pranil mentioned Werner's profligacy in front of goal against Newcastle. And why do I still own Mitrovic is a question I ask myself every game week. And yet here he is still in my team. I was suckered into playing him this week because Everton's defence, as I think we'll mention later on, it isn't great. I mean, they've conceded 2 goals in each of the last 6 games. So I thought, give him one more week. What's the worst that can happen? And look what happened. He got benched and came on for 1-pointer. When I was thinking of doing the -4 to Calvert-Lewin, which would have amply paid off, but there we go, 70 points. I'm complaining about very little. Otherwise, pretty decent week.
Yep. So we'll get into your team a little bit later on. So a quick word about our sponsors. DreamSetGo is a global portal for fans to gain access to sporting events around the world. Accommodation, flight tickets, hospitality, stadium visits, everything can be tailored exactly to your requirements. They also do celebrity experiences, which include masterclasses with your favorite sports celebrity or something as simple as birthday shoutouts. Visit dreamsetgo.co for more. The FPL Wire is a part of the Fantasy Scout Network, and all stats used in this podcast are taken from the FFS members area. Please sign up if you haven't already.
I wonder how many of our listeners can now say that off the bat. Just, I think our sponsors will be happy. Anyway, just talking about the agenda and things we're going to be talking about on the pod today. Zoph is going to be interviewing Neale in terms of what he's done in the past and his fantasy record. We're going to be looking at the top 5 premium assets at the moment. A lot of questions coming in terms of how do we rank these premium assets at the moment. So we're going to be discussing that. We're going to be discussing who the whipping boys are, which defenses to target for captaincy. We're going to discuss whether DCL is a blue pick because he has a tough run of fixtures in a couple of weeks. Is he a hold or a sell? We're going to deep dive into 2 teams, Newcastle as well as Liverpool. Neale here is a Newcastle fan, so hopefully he can give us some more insight on Newcastle. After that, we have the standard fixtures, captaincy, differential picks, teams, and the Q&A. Zoph, why don't you start?
Yep. So I'm just going to pull up Neil's record first over here. So you've been playing since 2006, Neil, I see. And you have a background in journalism, I see, prior to joining Fantasy Scout. So you were obviously an avid fantasy player even before you took the job. So tell us about what you did before FFS and how you ended up there.
Yeah, as you said, journalist by qualification, so studied at university, worked in sort of TV and radio listings, metadata for best part of a decade. And then my FPL writing started for a company called the Stats Zone, who very kindly took a bit of a punt on me, bit of an unknown at the time. And I worked with them as a freelancer for, I think, about a year, writing sort of Gameweek Previews, projections, like RMT and a bit of Champions League stuff as well, UCL Fantasy. And I think on the back of that, and just through pure luck and timing, Mark started advertising for roles to essentially replace him on the site. David obviously became the editor, taking Mark's job. And then they were hiring a deputy editor. And I think if I hadn't had that experience with Stats Zone, which I had in the previous 12 months, then I probably wouldn't have got a look in. So I'm very fortunate to do what I'm doing, and the timing of it especially. So that's my that's my background anyway.
So what's it like working full-time FPL? Has it impacted your enjoyment of the game? How was it before and after?
Yeah, I think my checkered career, as my season history will show, it's been in sort of stages of what kind of manager I've been. I think back in the day, I mean, I go back even further than that. 2002, I think, is when I started playing FPL in its current guise. Of course, the records only start from 2006. But I was never a casual. It's always meant something to me. It's always hurt when I've benched Gael Clichy for a 15-pointer, or I've got Graham Alexander in for a 21-pointer. But I was always more, I would say, a bit more reckless and less concerned about overall rank. It was always mini leagues. It was always mini leagues first, always the cash leagues, which of course is no longer a thing officially. And then I think gradually, maybe with the rise of analytics, Scout producing a members area, I did become more invested in the stats side of things, and I am now very much a not safe pair of hands, but a very, very boring, dullard manager. I don't take hits very often for starters. So that's my sort of background in FPL. I did it even when I was a kid. I used to run my own leagues when I was 11, 12 year old. So I think I was always destined to do this one way or the other.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I think I've put up some tweets a couple of years ago on the league I used to run, so I'll try and retweet that later today. But yeah, in terms of the job, how it impacts, I think I probably spend less time now thinking about my own team in terms of dedicated time looking at my own team. But of course, by osmosis, I'm absorbing 60 hours a week of when I'm working of information. I'm looking at your articles, I'm looking at scout notes and writing the team news. So obviously that information is sinking in, even if I'm not sat down at my laptop looking at my own team as much as I used to. So I think it does maybe make it less of a hobby, and obviously it is my job now, and I probably get less of a thrill out of it perhaps, but it is what it is. Like I say, I'm really lucky to do what I do, and by one way or the other, I am obviously absorbing information, even if I'm not, sat down on a Friday night as often, spending 7 hours looking at the members area.
So speaking of Fridays, what are those Fridays like for you, especially like last week when there are 15 to 16 pressers on the same day? So do you tune into these live as much as you can, or do you rely on the transcripts?
Yeah, as much as we can, we watch live. It's mostly me who's doing it. On a really busy day, David will chip in as well. But a lot of clubs show them live, or certainly a handful of them. Liverpool, Everton, Chelsea do. Palace, if you sign up to their site. I think there's a few others. And then a lot of them will have them out later on, either on YouTube officially through their site, or through, you've probably seen the accounts, Beanie Man Sports, Haters TV. So most of them are on there now. I think Bilic is the only exception. And where possible, I'll watch every single one. The good thing about the transcripts is that if I get them before I've seen the press conference, I can fast forward to the relevant parts. I mean, Bielsa's was a great one last week. It was an hour long, and I was never going to watch that in its entirety. But thankfully, somebody at Leeds Live transcribed the whole thing. Bless them. And I could go to the point where he was discussing Hernandez's injury, for example, and then watch it later on for the exact quote, because I think exact quotes are important. We've seen that before. Obviously, journalists, if they're transcribing live, then it's hard. You can have the best shorthand in the world, but you're going to make a mistake about the odd word, and wording is very, very key, especially when you're talking about flags and injuries, and whether a player might be fit or whether he is fit. There's sort of a big difference there. So, yeah.
So you write a lot of articles, and mainly as a provider of information, not opinion, is something that LR and I also do. So do you find it difficult to be neutral at times? Do you want to give opinion as well as just facts?
Yeah, I think maybe it's less about being neutral, because like even with my best intentions of being impartial, it's very, very hard not to construct a narrative about what you're writing. You know, if I'm writing scout notes, I might still be in the third person, I might be writing in house style, but I've still cherry picked stats and things I've seen in person to write about. So I suppose in a way it's still subjective opinion. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I think my view is of what my job is because I'm a better writer than I am fantasy manager. I think no one would deny that. My aim is to present people with as much information as they possibly can, and then they can make a decision. And we leave the strategy and the bigger calls to better managers. That's basically what me and David do. Like yourselves being prime examples, because you've got more clout behind you. You've got the records to back it up. Quite rightly, if someone, if I put up an article saying, here's when to play a wildcard this season, then people would go, well, what gives you the right to do that? And I think obviously I'm a decent manager. I'm always up there in the mini leagues, but I'm not quite that A-lister. So I think it's a nice balance of what we do, and I think that's a really good thing of getting people like yourselves on board, because whereas Mark could do both back in the day, he was an excellent manager and an excellent writer as well. I do think it's important that we hear from not just better managers, but different voices as well, different approaches, because no one FPL manager is the same. Yourselves being the prime example. I mean, you've got two very different approaches. So yeah, I'm quite happy doing the sort of analytical work, the FPL theorist rather than the strategist.
You're doing yourself your record a big disservice. I think you have a very good record also, so I don't think that is a difference at all. So LR, sorry, you were saying something?
Yeah, I just have a question for Neale. I mean, you do the team news section for FFS now. That's a high pressure job, considering the amount of exposure and draws and how you get picked for making the wrong calls.
Yeah.
What's the process in terms of how you're making those really difficult calls, especially for teams like Man City, where we don't really know what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Do you tend to go to forums, or it's always the best case scenario?
Yeah, it's very rarely my gut instinct. I try and use that as least as possible. It's always based on previous lineups in similar matches. You need a good example of Man City. I mean, that is the hardest to call. But for example, last season it became apparent that De Bruyne was playing in an advanced number 10, almost as a second striker in the tougher games away from home, when he would go with a double pivot of, say, Rodri and Fernandinho, or Rodri and Gundogan. So stuff like that you learn over time. I think with the more you're in the job, the more you spot these things. Forums are a big part of it. Obviously, by my own admission, I don't know what Slaven Bilic is thinking on every given week. So I will go to West Brom forums. I will look at minutes played in Europe. I'll look at minutes played over the international break, as we did last week. I will look at match ratings as well from the previous match reports and match ratings from previous weeks, so I can pinpoint if I haven't seen the match all the way through. And I watch probably sort of 5, 6, 7 games live every week. For the ones that I haven't, then I can see which players will hold off early or performing badly at risk of rotation. People will say in my team news entries that the predicted lineups is one thing. I think they're more for, if you're just in for a quick look at who might line up. But the blurbs are probably where it's at for the more experienced manager, because I sort of highlight where things could happen, where players might get dropped, even if I put them in my predicted 11. So, for example, Wolves, I would have said Jimenez is, he's a definite starter. Perhaps not over Christmas, like you may get benched once, but most weeks, absolutely sure start. Same with Bolly. Whereas you could say there might be a change at left wing back with Aït-Nouri and Marcel. It's kind of covering my behind a bit, but it's also it's the truth. I'm trying to stress that I'm not in the know. It's just pinpointing where there is a bit of rotation risk, because predicted lineups themselves don't really tell the full story. There has to be an acknowledgement that you can't foresee what the manager's going to do. So there was a bit of a I'm going to blow my own trumpet here, but there was a guy who was compiling a lot of team news entries, and he went for different sources and that. And Fantasy Football Scouts was the most accurate for the first 8 game weeks of the season, so I was very chuffed about that. There was a tiny amount in it, but I'm taking that. I mean, statistically probably insignificant, but thankfully he stopped doing it after game week 8, so I'm chuffed that I was at the top after that. So I'm taking that. I'm putting that on my CV.
Definitely you should. So what is the best thing about the job, and what is the biggest challenge you face?
Best thing is obviously is what I always wanted to do, write about football. I think I was never going to go down the hard-hitting journalist route, like sort of David Ornstein's and that, because I just probably haven't got it in me. But FPL is one thing I can talk about at length for hours, as my long-suffering other half will attest. I think the downsides is just that. I think it does impact on your family life a bit. It's a long, the hours are long. You're giving up your weekends, or at least part of the weekends. And there's obviously a bit of a trade-off between what you want to do and obviously having a healthy family life. But you know, I can't complain. I feel like I'm complaining. You know, there's people out there without jobs and are doing something they don't like. So I'm very, very lucky. And of course, no job's going to be perfect. I think maybe from a writing point of view, you mentioned earlier about wanting to write more subjective pieces, but I think sometimes because of the nature of a job, and it is a job, you're writing about stuff you maybe don't want to write about, or you're having to do certain things for the company, and maybe not writing, having enough time to write about things you would, like a more statistical analysis or sort of positional analysis, just because of the time pressures of the job. But really, really minor complaints, and it's I'm one of the very, very fortunate ones to be doing what I'm doing for a living.
So how do you think FPL has changed now over the years that you've been playing?
Funnily enough, I was talking to a guy who was writing a feature for The Athletic next week about the explosion in FPL over the past few years.
Exactly.
I think I said to him then that it's essentially the same game as it ever was. You know, it's the same as it was in 2002. The core principles: goals, assists, clean sheets, a bonus of changing, of various types. It's just the community around that and the noise around that's increased. The Premier League has got behind it massively now. They're promoting it a lot more, so I think it's obviously the popularity has exploded, and I think people are viewing it as a viable career route now. You've seen a lot of people, not necessarily through writing per se, because there's a limited number of jobs like that, but certainly launching social media accounts, whether it be on YouTube or Patreon or whatever. Because and it's kind of like the equivalent of fashion vlogging or something like that. You know, it's become a viable thing to do now, and people will think that's a bad thing, because time was when it was just something you do as a side thought on a Saturday afternoon. There was a bit of a hobby. It was almost like having like a small bet or something on the weekend. But it's very, very serious now, isn't it? It's a very, very serious thing. It's lost a bit of the lightheartedness about it. People get very, very serious about it, to the point of being aggressive, perhaps online. But that's just the way it is. You know, it's hugely popular now, and it isn't the cult niche pastime it was when it first started, when there was like 75,000 players playing. So it's big money, big business now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and all these years, can you just pick me your top 3 assets, nostalgia picks?
Playing since 2002, that's a lot of years.
Yeah, well, yeah. If you go back that way, you'll find Henri. I was really glad we did a World Cup of FPL in the summer, and which was like people voting on their favourite FPL assets of all time. And I was glad to see Henri made a really long run to that competition. I think he got the semi-finals of that. And the new intake of FPL Manager won't remember Henri as a fantasy manager, but he was lethal. Back in the day, I think there's one season where he had 24 goals or 25 assists, something like that. It was around about 50, 50 attack returns roughly, and he was goal dust back then. So I've got fond memories of him. Lampard, you'd have to, you can't look past him. I think he won that World Cup of FPL we did, and he was just a consistent returner for the best part of a decade. But I'll mention the name. I mentioned a name I've already name checked in this podcast already, and that's Graham Alexander. I've embellished his legacy over the years. He actually didn't have that good a season. He only had about 3 clean sheets, but he was a penalty taking budget defender, and I remember having him in for his 21 pointer, and for some reason, I don't know why, I think because he was a differential at the time, and none of my mini league mates had him in, and he just sticks in my memory 10 years on, even over Lundstrom last season. So I think it's maybe more the differentials and the cult figure, the one season wonders are sticking in my mind more than the long-serving players like Rooney and Lampard. I think, the Yamichus, who I had in from the off as well from Gameweek 1, fond memories of him, Dempsey, think it's these players who make FPL rather than the heavy hitters.
I was hoping to hear Ryan Taylor's name, being a Newcastle fan.
I think being a pessimistic Newcastle fan, I think I didn't own him that much, even during that season where he was doing bits. Of course, he was at Wigan before that as well. Yeah, free kick specialist, long range shooter. Yeah, he was a good pick. But as I say, my inherent pessimism about Newcastle means I probably didn't own him for much of that season.
So getting now to your core FPL style, you work a lot with stats. Which particular stats do you like for attacking players and also for defensive players? And teams.
Attacking... Sorry, Chris.
And I said, and teams also, like, both which metrics do you look for?
So attacking players, probably no surprises here. Big chances and penalty box touches, probably an XG, probably my top three. Shots in the box, still important, but maybe less so. I mean, I'll give you Mitrovic as a horrible example of what I've suffered, because he'll score highly on shots in the box and shots on target. But if you watch him, a lot of his efforts are just aimless looping headers that end up in the goalkeeper's arms, don't cause any problem whatsoever. And that's where he looks better on paper than he does in real life. What I do look for, and probably an underestimated and underused stat, certainly I would admit this on our site as well in terms of what we write about, is goal conversion rate. So that is massively important, and something I'm increasingly looking at. Mitrovic, again, I'll use him as an example. I knew about this even before I picked him at the start of the season, and I still did it. He had a awful goal conversion rate the last time he was in the Premier League. His record in the Championship was sub 20%, which is, if you're in the second tier of English football and it's below that, I think you're going to, well, Bamford's an exception, but you're going to struggle when you make the step up. And his goal conversion rate is, again, abysmal this season. Whereas you look at Vardy, you look at Aubameyang was traditionally... had a high conversion rate. They need less than half the chances that a Mitrovic does or a Mopai does to rack up the goal. So I think if it's a consistent conversion rate as well, Vardy's had a conversion rate above 20% for, I think, 4 or 5 years. So it is sustainable. It's not a freak occurrence. And hence why he is known as a stat buster, even though he's a consistent performer as anybody in the top flight in terms of actually putting the ball in the back of the net.
I'm very happy you mentioned Mopai there. Very happy.
I've been lulled into him before on a few occasions, and realised I've made a mistake very soon. But defences, again, probably obvious ones. Shots in the box, because I think that is relevant for defences. Big chances conceded, the main one. I also look at goalkeepers. So not just what the defences are doing, but their expected goals prevented tallies, I think, is very important. I think I'll use the example of Chelsea from last season. Statistically, one of the best defences in the division. Like they were top 5 for a lot of the metrics, like big chances conceded, shots in the box conceded. But they had kept between the posts, and I think he was the worst keeper in Europe for XGP. I mean, of course, it's obvious just by watching the games, but no offence to him, but. The stats do actually back that up, and I do look for that because you saw Henderson last season. Sheffield United's defence wasn't actually that good in terms of conceding chances. He had a fantastic goal prevention rate. Ramsdale obviously less so this season, and they're clean sheetless. So goalkeeper stats are as important as the overall defensive numbers as well, I think.
Yeah, that's coming into play actually this season with Johnson, because West Brom, we're going to talk about them later. They're conceding a lot of chances, but the keeper is saving so many of them.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that your FPL style, you're primarily a dullard at heart. So what has worked for you in the past, and what are the areas where you'd like to improve?
It's hard to say, because I do preach patience generally, but you've still got to know when to jump off players. So I think patience is a virtue when we're talking about the tried and tested big hitters. For me, I know there's different approaches, but for me, if I've highlighted a sequence of fixtures for a certain player, for example, Son at the start of the season, I had him from Gameweek 1, so I knew Spurs were top of the season ticket. I knew he was a proven performer. I was going to give him an 8 stretch of games, 9 long stretch of games, no matter what. I think, obviously, stuff can happen in the early stages of the season. But I'd seen enough under Mourinho. I'd seen enough of his stats. I'd seen enough of how he plays with Kane to make a call on keeping him for that length of time. And of course, he blanked in game week 1. A lot of people sold him, and then we saw what he did in game week 2. So yes, calls can go the other way, but generally when the time to jump off is probably Mitrovic and Werner to my expense. I mean, Werner's come good now, but Mitrovic isn't a proven performer in the Premier League. Werner wasn't a proven performer in the Premier League, and I've got to know going forward. I've got to know when to differentiate and when to jump off, because there was nothing to suggest Mitrovic was going to come good. You know, we've seen it in 2018-19. He had a good start to the season, but his conversion rate was pretty poor. And I don't know why I thought it was going to be any different this time around. I think maybe because of the penalties thing, and maybe because of their fixtures were decent at the start of the season as well. Yeah, the fixtures were good. I think they were top of our ticker for the first day of Gameweek, so that was one of the reasons. But yeah, as you say, I think I remember listening to Tom Freeman, who's I really like. He's excellent. He's been on your podcast, and his approach is probably the closest to mine, I think. And that I very rarely do early transfers to the detriment of my own team value. And I'll try and wait for as much information as possible, everything I can possibly get. Press conferences, what's happened in Europe in midweek, to give me a chance to sit down and look at the stats after a busy week of work and actually just try and absorb information. So I'm nearly always, 9 times out of 10, a late Friday night transferer. As you'll see in my team value, it does come with a cost, quite literally. But yeah, that's my approach, and I think the things I have to improve on, I mentioned one there about no one to jump off players, is the sort of psychological aspect, because I am, as I said earlier, I think I'm pretty good theorist. You know, I can pinpoint, I can look at matches, and I can pick out players who might perform well in coming weeks, and then but when it comes to actually applying that into my own team, I just capitulate. I'm such a weak-minded person. Like I'm trying to block out the noise, but it's very hard. It's not just the noise, but the ownership figures as well. That's maybe something else I need to stop looking at, because Mitrovic and Werner were, I think, maybe subconsciously partly chosen because they had such astronomical ownership figures at the beginning of the season. And I was thinking, well, if I have them, at least I'm not falling behind from the off.
Absolutely, I get that.
Yeah, so I think that is something I have to work on, the mental aspect of the game, because the more successful ones, successful FPL managers, they'll all have got different approaches, but the one thing they have in common is a resolve that their method is the best way, or their sort of strategy is the best way, and they stick to that.
I can relate with your late transfer approach. I think it's definitely the right way to do things this season.
Certainly this season, yeah.
For sure. I mean, Zaha news came out of nowhere. I mean, there was just somebody who predicted on the Crystal Palace forum that maybe there was something. So you just have to wait as late as possible to make your transfers, I reckon.
And also, when you know so many things that can go wrong, since you follow all that stuff, it's natural to expect things to go wrong.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So I think you had mentioned, Neil, you were thinking of wildcarding. We'll get to that right at the end when we discuss your team. But thanks for that. That was a lot of fun. We should now move on to the discussion of our hot topics, starting with the top 5 premium assets.
Now, if you were to wildcard, Neil, who are the top 3-4 premium assets? Look, we're talking only about attackers here. And 9.5 million plus is what we're looking to follow.
So at the moment in my first draft, and it's by far from certain that I am pulling the trigger, as we'll discuss later on. I've got De Bruyne in there, I've got Vardy in there, and I've got at the moment Fernandes. But I'm increasingly thinking of fitting Salah straight back in after getting rid of him last week for Fernandes. So yeah, I think. As we're about to discuss, I've not struggled with this conundrum for as much for a long time. It's so difficult. I think Game Week 9 was like the worst thing that could have happened to me in terms of my Game Week 10 wildcard, because I'm doubting it now whether it's the right thing to do. We've not seen anything from City yet to suggest they're worth dismantling a team for. But that's fantasy management. You've got to know when things are going to turn. You've got to anticipate when they are going to hit the streak. That is FPL in a nutshell. Getting on them early, so I'm loath to go overboard on City, but I do think one representative from their team is just I wouldn't say you have to have it, but I mean the next 4 at home or Burnley, Fulham, West Brom, and Newcastle. There isn't. I don't think. I mean, you could maybe put Sheffield United in there, but I think there's not a better run of fixtures than that. And even if they are off the usual levels, then they're going to rack up 2 or 3-0 wins in those games comfortably. And De Bruyne, while he's not hitting the levels as he was last season, but I think he's been deployed in a slightly different role. I think it's been such a disjointed start of the season for City. They've been without a striker for a few game weeks. They've had De Bruyne playing as a number 10 quite often. And I think you'll see that in his stats. His stats are generally down from last year in terms of creativity, but his shots in the box are all up.
Yep.
So I think he is the one I'm going for. And I think when they're playing these kind of opposition as well, I think they'll go back maybe towards that 4-3-3. De Bruyne more so on the right of midfield. I think his chance creation will increase off the back of that. And I'm thinking, my logic behind this is that they haven't been creating as many big chances, perhaps because they haven't had a bona fide striker for a few of the games. Because I think big chance creation is as much about off the ball movement as it is about the pass itself. You know, it's like if you haven't got an orthodox striker up there making those movements, then maybe there's no one on the end of De Bruyne's wicked deliveries. I mean, there's no doubt they're not hitting the levels of last season. Guardiola said that himself, but he's the one I'm looking at from City at the moment. I'm not going to do the double up, certainly. And then Vardy, again, for the fixtures. Brilliant next four, including Everton. Everton, whose defence is still a bit of a mess. And then the one I think I'll probably pass over to you for is Fernandes v Salah. And I think having seen Liverpool dismantle Leicester at the weekend and Salah to come back into that team and how he normally does over Christmas, he's usually an excellent performer in December. Then I'm increasingly looking towards getting back in for Fernandes, I think.
So let's have your rank. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How would you rank your top 5 heavy hitters?
Right. Okay. So based on my selections and my wildcard, I think I'll go. It depends how long you look in terms of fixture look ahead. I'll say De Bruyne, Vardy, Salah. So De Bruyne, Salah, Vardy, and then 4 or 5. I mean, Son. Maybe I think I probably put Son fourth ahead of Kane. I think we saw at the weekend what's going to happen in these games where Tottenham are going to counter attack, where Son's going to be the more advanced and Kane's going to drop deep. Kane didn't have a shot at the weekend. And then maybe Fernandes 5, and I've omitted Kane from that 5, which is hard to do. But I'm just looking at the fixtures ahead and how he's likely to play. And it's about making those calls about when you think things are going to turn, and it's hard because you know that if you get it wrong, then you're going to be punished.
Absolutely. So that's fair. Now, LR, you go first.
So I saw highlights of the Liverpool game, and I saw Brighton play against Aston Villa. I feel like if Salah's getting 30 odd minutes midweek, I think he's one of the best captaincy options for the weekend if he's looking at sharp and if COVID hasn't affected his fitness at all. So he's number 1 for me at the moment, because it seems like City have had a little downturn in form. So Liverpool naturally are the team you trust the most when it comes to attack. So he's number 1 for me, nailed on penalties. Number 2, it has to be one of the City boys. Now, I do a little bit of cheating and have a little bit of caveat, right? At the moment, it's De Bruyne. But I do like the fact that Sterling's not played any international games and he played just 20 minutes. So he's fairly well rested. So, and with Sterling, you need to watch him for 30, 40, 50 minutes to judge whether he's on it or not. Because he just takes that extra 2 seconds if he's not naturally in form or feeling confident. So I'd say judge the game, Champions League game at the weekend. I'm expecting him to start. I'm expecting him to play both the home games. And if you feel like he's on it, go for Sterling, because I still am in the mind frame that when it comes to captaincy, I trust captaining a Sterling more than I trust captaining a De Bruyne, because I feel like Sterling's returns are more predictable and explosive. So based on form, one City mid at number 2, just based on what I mentioned. And number 3 is really tough. It's a form versus fixture debate when it comes to Vardy versus Werner versus Kane. Now, the answer I'm going to give is going to make you really happy, because at the moment, I trust the Chelsea attack more than I trust the Spurs attack, or I trust the Leicester attack. And despite Vardy having the fixtures, I feel like Werner's going to match him. So if you're going to select that striker position for the midterm, maybe 7, 8, 9 game weeks, let's take Werner in there, because he's still on penalties. He's not I think Chelsea also kind of team that are going to win a lot of penalties. If he's gotten the 2 penalties that Rogino got a few weeks ago against Crystal Palace, everybody would be talking about Werner. And he's been matching Kane for the past few weeks. So it's splitting hairs between Kane and Werner for me at number 3 and 4, and number 5 will be Vardy for me. I don't really like Fernandes as much as a pick because I don't trust our attack at the moment. I don't think the next few fixtures are really easy for us. I just have some stats as well when it comes to the non-penalty XG plus XA per 90 minutes this season. Kane is at number 1, Mane is at number 2. Fernandes is 27th in the league, 0.48. So all of his returns right now primarily are coming for penalties. And I mean, that is something, it's been sustaining when it comes to United for a long time. But I just don't know if the fixtures are good enough for us. Sterling at the moment is 40th in the league at 0.40. The only caveat, we're going to be talking about Liverpool later, but if you're not jumping on a Diogo Jota because you don't think he's nailed enough, then Sadio Mane would be in my top 3 because I trust the Liverpool attack more than I trust the other attacks at the moment. So at the cost of Timo or Kane or Vardy, I'd have Mane at number 3. But because we have an option like Diogo Jota in the ecosystem at the moment, I'm going with Werner at the moment. But I might get convinced to put Kane in there and drop Werner instead, because actually I've looked at the next 3 fixtures for Spurs. Now I don't know if Chelsea, yes, it seems that Spurs are going to be playing on the counter, but the Arsenal home game and the Crystal Palace game, they look like more Kane games to me, where I do expect Spurs to keep a fair amount of the ball. So I don't think dropping Kane is a really good move at the moment. I was dead set on keeping Werner and selling Kane for the moves I'm going to talk about later, but I'm really thinking about keeping Kane instead and dropping Werner because I like the Arsenal fixture and the Crystal Palace fixture. Kane. Where are you at with the premium assets?
So I think Salah and KDB number 1 and 2. There's no real explanation needed. Now this is after that is where it gets trickier. So essentially you have to pick 3 of Fernandes, Vardy, Kane, Son or Werner. So I would say Kane and Son are delivering consistently. So I would actually back Son here, like for the reasons you said, and this is what I said on previous podcasts also. I expect him to benefit and being able to play on the counter attack. So I would go Son as number 3, also because he's cheaper. Then
but do you think the Arsenal game and the Crystal Palace are going to be counter-attack games for Spurs?
It depends how Arteta... The Palace game, probably not. The Palace game is probably going to be a deep block again. The Wolves game might also be a deep block again. But then you have Chelsea, who we probably play... We press from the front a lot, so they're going to be spaces to counter-attack. But I think his price is... Now you have to look at this. He's almost 3 million cheaper than Salah. That has to be taken into account, right? It's not like that much... The 3 million can buy you a lot. It's just a difference between, let's say, Watkins and a Werner almost. So Son would probably be over there. Now for the fourth one, it was between Bruno and Vardy for me. Now Bruno has more routes to points than Vardy does, but the fixtures are tough, like you said. There's Southampton, West Ham and Man City in the next 3. Vardy has Fulham, Sheffield United, Brighton. So purely on that basis, I'd say Vardy. So, and then for the fifth one is between Kane or Bruno. So, like you said, Kane had 0 shots against Man City, but I expect him to have more against Arsenal, Palace, teams like that. So, I'd go Kane for number 5.
All right. And neither of y'all would be looking at Sadio Mane, seriously?
Probably because of the Jota thing, like what you just said.
Okay. That's the only reason. Otherwise, he'd be in the conversation for you?
I think so. Definitely.
Right. For you, Neil, as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I'm still hesitant. I mean, Jota at 6.6 is, it almost looks like the Foden of Game Week 1. I think this is too good to be true, and even if he gets benched, he can still do some damage. And Foden hasn't really panned out that way, but I think given the dearth of central midfield options as well, and the winnable fixtures coming up, Fabinho is going to be needed at centre half for a long time. Henderson, we don't know how long that is. I think it doesn't sound too good at the moment about when he's going to be back. So I think as much as anything else to circumvent the lack of central midfielders, there's going to be a lot more of that 4-2-3-1 played. And I can see Jota getting a lot of game time over Christmas. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think given that what's that, like nearly 5.5 million saving on Mane, it's pretty significant. And there was even before this new formation came into play, there was widespread talk of whether he would oust Firmino from that, that sort of central role anyway. So yeah, he's actually in my wildcard team at the moment. I'm still not convinced I'm going there. But his stats, as we're discussing it, are better than Mane's, I think, at the moment. So yeah, I think for that reason, you look at it's not just about the players themselves, but coverage from the clubs and who else can cover those fixtures and make a substantial saving as well.
Absolutely.
Because I'd like to have two Liverpool attackers, because for the midterm, for the next 10, 12, 13 fixtures, Liverpool have actually a great run of fixtures.
Yeah, they do.
In the midterms, they seem like good set and forget options. So yeah, we'll move on to our next topic in terms of the defenses to target. Neil, we'll push this question to you first. Which defenses do you like your captains or your attackers playing against at the moment? It's not quite as clear as it was last season.
No, they've I think, as you intimated there, they've all kind of improved a bit from the early weeks of the season. I mean, the signings Fulham and West Brom have made, they're not by any stretch, the new Wolves or anything like that, but they've definitely reinforced at the back. Ivanovic has made a big difference to West Brom. They've got a competent keeper between the posts as well, as you discussed. Fulham, even they have improved, I think, with Anderson and Adarabioyo at the heart of the defence. They've made full-back reinforcements as well. I think, yes, there was a bit of a capitulation at the weekend, but they were missing Zambo Anguissa from midfield from the start of that game. And I think he makes a significant difference. I mean, they are still teams you target. There's no escaping that fact. It's just they're not quite as porous as they were at the start of the season.
Would you put your team in there?
Well, we'll discuss Newcastle quite in depth later in this pod, but I wouldn't put them high up as maybe the other ones I've discussed. Bruce is kind of caught between two mindsets. He's desperately trying to get away from the Rafa approach, which was 5 at the back, and he wants to put his own stamp on his team and make us more attacking. But it just doesn't work. I mean, he said himself that the players just aren't capable of playing in that system, the back four, without leaving gaping holes at the back. And we've seen a switch back to a back 5 as of game week 6. So we're back in that wing back system now. So I think we have stiffened at the back. I think the last 4 game weeks there's only 2 clubs conceded fewer big chances, and we've played the likes of Chelsea, Everton, Southampton, high flying teams, all top half teams in that time. So I don't think we're that bad. Yes, we haven't kept a clean sheet since game week 1, but I still think we're capable of making life difficult for teams and racking up, say, 8 or 9 clean sheets a season. So maybe I'd put us in the sort of Division 2 of the Whitman Boys league. Sheffield United, similarly, again, clean sheetless all season, but rarely hammered. They're not that far away. They've had loads of injury problems at the back. They've got an inferior keeper, I will say that now, so that does make a difference, I think. There aren't really standout porous defences, I would say. I still think Fulham and West Brom are capable of conceding. Fulham especially, I think, capable of conceding 2 or 3 in any game. But we saw at the start of the season when there was 5s and 4s flying in. I think they have improved slightly. Everton's, you could give a shout to Everton's at the moment, who are awful, really, at the moment. No matter what system they try, they've got a dodgy keeper between the posts, unfortunately, Pickford. Ancelotti tried a 3-5-2 at the weekend, a wing-back system. I think is 3-4-3 as much to incorporate or try and get the best out of Rodriguez as it was to show up at the back. I think he's less concerned about that.
Yeah, they looked leakier in defence, I thought, after that switch.
Yeah, I think they've Ancelotti's policy of rotating centre halves, which he's done from the moment he came in. He was always trying to give. It was Holgate was the mainstay, and then it was Mina and Keane rotating around him. That can't help. You need sort of stability there at the back, I think. Coleman's not what he was, I don't think. I think he's in his 30s now and probably a fading force. I know he did have a bit of a renaissance towards the end of last season, but and I don't think. I mean, Alan is sort of tough tackling, but he's not the sort of. He's a different player, He's sort of playable. He's more at home, I think. He'd be more at home in the right of that midfield 3. with someone like a Delph maybe behind him. So I think they've got their serious problems at the back, and that's why I'm looking at Vardy as a 4-week punt rather than a 3-week, because they've got Everton in game week 13.
Absolutely.
Your thoughts?
So
On the teams,
I think we are in the agreement about Fulham. I think they are the leakiest team. I think we're the 5 other team to target. But I also, when I look at whipping boys, I also look at fixtures to target for my defense. I think they're less so than West Brom. I think Fulham are more capable of scoring than, say, West Brom are. So West Brom are giving up a lot of chances, but I think it's their goalkeeper really who's been bailing them out as much as Ivanovic. I think Johnston, even against Saints, he had 7-8 saves this game. So that's really the main difference. That's really keeping them from becoming whipping boys. So the day that Johnston has a bad game, I think they can be hit for 5 or 6. So then Sheffield, obviously, like you see on the table here, they're the worst for the XG conceded non-penalty over the last 4 weeks, 8.3. That's significantly worse than second place Leicester, who are 6.95. So Sheffield definitely. But the problem with Sheffield is, right, like I think Jo had mentioned this on the previous pod, even once they concede, they don't really commit too many men forward after conceding. So they rarely concede more than 1 or 2. So, and then after that, you have Burnley, who are unlikely, to give up a lot of chances, but you can still count them getting beaten like 2-0, and it's a good fixture to play a defender against always. So, and then I would say Newcastle, I'm sorry about that, Neil, but I think Newcastle give up a lot of chances, but like you said, they're not big chances.
Yeah.
Like even against Chelsea, that could have been 4 or 5 if Werner that day, was clinical. It could have been a much bigger scoreline.
Yeah, for me, this whole thing is a little bit subjective as well. I mean, straight up, like Neil mentioned in Division 1 of the Whipping Boys, I'd put Fulham and Newcastle out there because we'll talk about Newcastle a little later, but I feel like they're just not playing. They're just parking at the moment and they're incapable of getting anything done. So when you're captaining a player, you're normally going to captain the premium guys, the 9.5 million plus guys that we spoke about. And I feel like these good teams are going to be able to play against teams like Newcastle and take advantage and score 3+ goals. Now, there are a few teams that it's sort of subjective. Like I mentioned, in the past few pods, I wouldn't really like Spurs against a team like Sheffield United or Burnley because they're more suited to play on the counter. I don't know how attacking they will be against these teams that park. But I did mention to you, that I was pretty confident about owning Werner against a team like Sheffield United or Burnley because I feel like there's enough creativity in a team like Chelsea which can take advantage, play around and create chances against resolute defenses. When it comes to team like Spurs, I would like them playing against teams like Leeds, where they're going to leave a lot of gaps open for Spurs to play on the counter. So it's sort of subjective for me. And outside of that, I don't mind captaining a player if he's playing Everton at the moment. I see that as a good fixture for my attacker. Even if my attacker is playing against a Leeds United, I see that as a good fixture. And that depends on the kind of team. So I like a Spurs player. I like a Chelsea player against a Leeds United defense. I've seen FPL Rhinos. He's one of the more maverick guys on Twitter. He's a Leeds United fan, and what he's been doing the last 3 or 4 games, he's getting an attacker and captaining him against Leeds. He did that with Vardy. He got him on, and it's worked wonders for him. So it's a bit subjective. And then one more team I want to talk about is Brighton Hove Albion. I saw them play against Villa, and they weren't really good in defense. They leaked a lot of chances. So I feel like because of the kind of team Brighton are, and they like to stamp their authority on the game, they are able to get good statistics in defense against teams that are inferior to them. But I feel like teams that are better than them when it comes to a Spurs, when it comes to United, Chelsea, Liverpool, I feel like they're capable of scoring 3 or 4 or 5 goals against them because I don't see Brighton changing the way they play their game against the slightly better teams as well. So I don't mind captaining a player against Brighton as well, which is why I'm thinking about this weekend, and I feel like the guys who are on Salah early, they're going to be benefiting because it looks like the standout captaincy pick for me this weekend.
Yeah, that's a really good point there, Pranil. I think it's you've got to look where in what games the improvements are being made. So Fulham, for example, have had a decent run of fixture, so that it's one thing improving against West Brom's attack, and it's another to take that improvement into an away game, man. I think Palace were a good example from last season. Everyone thinks Palace are a really secure defensive side. They kept, I think, 9 clean sheets, all of them against the bottom half or clubs ranked 10th or below, and they didn't keep a single clean sheet in matches against the top 9. So you have to sort of, as you said there are teams that are and probably Newcastle are among them, who are capable of carving out stout defensive performances and clean sheets against the also rounds, the fellow lower mid-table teams. Burnley perhaps amongst that as well. I think Burnley are traditionally, you can back them for clean sheets against the teams around them, but I mean, they went to Man City last season and got beat 5-0. I know that was just after the restart. And they
City have scored 4 goals at least in the last 3 or 4 games against Burnley.
Yeah.
It was quite a surprising stat.
Yep.
So, I mean, these teams that have a lot of creativity, they're able to pick apart, defenses that are a little stubborn. So, yeah. Anything you guys want to add, or we can move on to our...
I think we can move on about the DCL topic now.
Yeah, you had a lot to say about this, so why don't you start?
So now, Everton after Leeds play Burnley, Man City, Chelsea, Leicester and Arsenal. So that's all teams which I would say are pretty competent defensively. So my initial plan on my wildcard was to free up money for Fernandes to Salah, was to sell DCL for that run. But now looking at that formation, especially with Ancelotti played, I think that was just built to get service into DCL. And to be honest, I think he's blanked, just once this season. Maybe I'm overthinking why I need to remove him, because I have his stats also up here. He's doing pretty well for stats now. For XG non-penalty, he's ranked the 4th over the last 4 game weeks. He's getting the shots inside the box. He's getting shots on target. So at a price point of 7.5 odd, I think he's a pretty much stick and forget for the season. If he blanks a couple of games, if Everton score, it seems everything's set up just to get service to him.
I agree. I think the only reason I'd maybe think about losing DCL is if he's funding a crucial upgrade in attack for my captaincy. But outside of that, the only reason I would lose him is if either Richarlison or James or Digne got injured, because we've known that they only have a first team. They don't have a backup plan. So if one of the crucial guys in the first team, gets injured, then get rid. Otherwise, I see no reason to sell up. What are your thoughts there, Neil?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I think I owned Calvert-Lewin when he scored since Ancelotti joined. So he was my bête noire for the first, 9 game weeks of Ancelotti's reign. Avoided him, thinking it wasn't sustainable. He kept doing it. Got him in after the restart when he had a terrible run of form and didn't score. And then haven't owned him at all this season for some reason. I think I've just been fighting fires elsewhere. But I am looking at him on a wild card belatedly. Maybe it's the wrong time to think about it, as you said. But I look at who he's scored against in the past since Ancelotti took charge, and he's scored goals against Arsenal, he scored goals against United, he scored goals against a lot of the top half clubs as well, and he's someone who, as you said, is the focal point of a team's attack. There isn't really a rotation risk around him. He's been benched in 1 game since Ancelotti took charge, which was Gameweek 38 when it was a dead rubber, and he wanted Moise Kean to have a run out, and he's thriving, and as you said, that system change at the weekend with Digne as essentially a left winger, trying to get Rodriguez's creativity best out of him as well. Iwobi on the right as well.
Iwobi had a pretty good game.
He did. Yeah, it's a shame he's not listed as an FPL defender, because he would have been something to look at. But I mean, me just looking towards him on my wild card, despite that, if he run tells you much about what I think about him, because I think it's been the main mistake of my season, not owning him effectively. And the next 2 for kickoff, Leeds and who was it they got? Burnley, yeah. I'm seeing prospering there, and yes, of course, I think the attack and returns will potentially dry up beyond that. I think that's the argument towards Kane and Son as well. We all know that they're capable of scoring in every game. It's just whether they can be outperformed by players in their price point over that stretch, and it is possible with Everton. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, pretty like it's what you're going to do with that money. If you did downgrade to say Antonio, I really like if he's fit, where you can invest that, especially with those premium hitters in midfield clamouring for your attention, because you're not likely to captain Calvert-Lewin through any of that run, and so. I don't think he's going to punish you that much if you went without him. So yeah, all right. I can see both sides.
The ownership is scary, but that's the thing, like we discussed earlier, around 60%. But like you said, not going to be captain much. So And somebody like Bamford and Antonio, I think you're spot on, could possibly match him.
Yeah.
Right, so now we get into your team discussion, Neil. Let's move on to Newcastle. Newcastle are top of the fixture ticker for the next 5. You guys play Palace, Villa, West Brom, Leeds, and Fulham. It's a nice run of fixtures. So, what do you think about the potential in attack and in defense?
Well, I can see I can hear the sounds of a lot of people turning off the podcast at this second. But yeah, as I said earlier, I think Bruce is caught between two mindsets. I think it'll be even worse if there were fans in, because the criticism at the moment is that we're not attacking enough. But he knows that if we play a 4-2-3-1 as we did against likes of Brighton, we played a 4-4-2 in that game actually, that we're going to get picked apart. So whether he sticks with that system just in spite of the upcoming fixtures and still plays. If he was playing 5 at the back for the next 5, then I'd be more confident about a clean sheet. My worry is that he'll try and take the game to the likes of West Brom and Fulham and go with a 4 at the back, and that makes me slightly less confident about a clean sheet. The Palace away game is another one. I think it could be without Zaha. I don't know what his isolation stage is, or if he's going to be back for that. That's another fixture that actually looks better than it does on paper. So I think I'd avoid their attack. Wilson, of course, is the only one I'd partly consider because he's on pens and he will play more games than not. I think over Christmas, I think there's concerns about his hamstring. That's why he missed out against Chelsea, and maybe he might get benched for one of the games over Christmas. But my money and the only way I'm looking at the moment, because I think there's possibly better options than Wilson in his price point, even taking into account the fixtures, is in defence. And I'm looking at Lewis. So he is one of the cheapest starting defenders now in the game. He's down to 4.3, which I think is the same as Kilman.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's very few players beneath that who are actually regularly starting. And his chance creation's all right. I think he's created 7 this season, which is not great, but they've had the fixture run they've been on. He hasn't been given that much scope to attack. And I'd be looking at him for playing game weeks 12 and 14, possibly even game week 10, as a 4th defender or a 5th defender. And it's purely because of his cost. I think if it was anybody 4.5 or above, I wouldn't really be interested. But I do think we are capable of it. As I mentioned, those big chances conceded stats earlier. It's just the thing that's put me off is the fact that Bruce is caught in a bit of a no man's land. I think we have got Shelvey to come back in. I think that will help Wilson. He's been injured recently, missing his creativity. St. Maximum just hasn't been on it at all this season. I think ever since he signed that deal, he's just hasn't
6-year
performed.
Contract.
Yeah. It's the worst thing you can do. Somebody give them a long-term deal and they stop performing. And I think Wilson, half of Wilson's goals have been from the penalty spot. Yes, of course, that could continue in this season of all seasons, but I think I'd be looking more at the defence than the attack.
It's a shame because at the end of last season, once you guys secured promotion, y'all were actually playing some really, really good football. And I was coming into the season thinking that there might be a few value picks emerging from Newcastle because of the potential that were displayed at the end of the season. That's just not there this season.
The one thing I say is that we've still got the likes of as I say, Shelvey to come back in, Fraser to come back in as well. It was missing the hamstring problem. Almiron was benched as well because he just come back from Paraguay. So there is a bit of creativity to come back in there. And from a defensive perspective, we didn't play. We were out Hayden for a while, and I think he's our best defensive midfielder. He's been playing with Hendrick all the season. He just hasn't been at the races. I know Hayden wasn't great at the weekend, but I think he'll come into his own against the likes of West Brom and Fulham.
What about Matt Ritchie? Do you think Ritchie replaces Lewis in the back 3? I think he was playing left wing back for a large part of last season, right?
Yeah, he certainly wasn't a Benitez, yes. And I think the reason why Bruce moved for Lewis in the summer is because he wasn't convinced about Ritchie in that position. Now, if we were playing with a back 4, despite what I've just said, I'd be more confident about Lewis starting every week because he's an orthodox left back, whereas Ritchie isn't. Ritchie can play in that wing back system, but not as an out and out left back. So yeah, that is a slight concern. Ritchie is back in training now. He was in contention for the weekend, but just missed out. It's just match fitness at the moment, so he is to come back in. And Yeah, that is a concern. I do think the shirt's Lewis's to lose at the moment. I don't think he's done anything particularly wrong. Richie can play on the opposite side as well. Richie's played on the right quite a lot for Bournemouth and Newcastle. And right wing back is a problem we've struggled more than the left. So it's a possibility that he could come in for. It's been Murphy playing there for a bit. It's been Manquillo, who was terrible against Chelsea. So Richie could come in on the opposite side. I think Lewis is fine for now, but I do understand the concerns. It's just a shame where we are at present because it is such a good run, and it's a shame there's so much uncertainty about where we're heading in terms of if it was Benitez, and I was sure he was going to play a farther back, I'd be all over this fixture run.
So that's the tricky thing with Newcastle. Like you said, when I see easy fixtures, I think you're less likely for a clean sheet because you're actually going to come out and take the game. That's what I always notice.
All right, we'll move on to the big boys now. Liverpool. Any thoughts? Zoph, you were a little cold on Jota last week, but I believe that opinion has changed now. What's your thinking?
Absolutely. So I'll just go through some stats first. Now for Liverpool, they are top for big chances over the last 4 game weeks. They're also top for shots on target, just behind, I think, Villa and Leeds for shots in the box. So like we saw, I was a bit worried about how the attack would cope with all these injuries, but they proved me wrong. So I'll just read some of Jota's stats real quick. So over the last 4 game weeks, no midfielder has landed more shots on target than Jota 6. Only Trezeguet 13 and Grealish 11 have taken more shots in the box than his 8, and he is joint top with Salah for big chances over that period. He trails only Trezeguet 1.54 versus 1.51, so it's minimal for expected goals, non-penalty XG, and he's played only, I think, 280 minutes out of a possible 360. So those numbers are insane. These are 11 million, 12 million mid numbers for the price of 6.5 million. You just can't ignore that.
Unless you're Trezeguet.
Absolutely. So, and Neale made a very good point, and this is something I noticed also when Keita went down. Is I think when they're going to more likely have to play about that 4-2-3-1 with Firmino playing as a number 10 because of the options they're lacking in midfield. Yeah. Fabinho is going to centre back. So I think that you definitely see Jota. And I was listening to the Athletic podcast, the Liverpool. They were just waxing lyrical all over Jota. They were calling him the signing of the season, and they say he's probably the in-form attacker right now out of the front 4.
Yeah. What are your thoughts there, Neale? Anything to add?
I even before Saturday or Sunday, whenever we're playing Leicester, I was looking at Robertson from this. I know a lot of people are ditching him or trying to downgrade him to free up funds, and of course you can't fit all these players in your team. But Robertson is someone I'm trying to shape my defence around at the moment.
If I was on Wildcard, I'd have it in my team right now.
Yeah, I think that their fixtures. I mean, I wrote Frisk in the fixtures last week, and I mentioned it almost as a footnote Liverpool's games. But if you're looking long term, which of course what a wildcard is, you're trying to look beyond the next few game weeks. Certainly for glue players, then their fixtures are fantastic. Even Wolves, which on paper isn't, it doesn't look like a good fixture. I mean, they can't go for toffee at the moment. I mean, that's like 9 from 9, and their fixtures were excellent. Beyond that, I think that the West Ham hammering was a real turning point for them. It made Nuno realise that he was a defence-first manager, and they've gone back to basics since then. So, clean sheet possibilities there. I think Fabinho is a very underrated centre-half. I mean, I was watching a bit of Carragher last night, talking about him on Monday Night Football, and about how he wouldn't say he was better than Van Dijk, but how he was because of that high line, he was already planning to move backwards. His shape when he was facing the ball, he already had half a step ready to cover Vardy's runs and things like that. So I don't think a Fabinho Matip partnership is really as bad as probably are made out or other people have made out in the past. I think it's there's maybe a lack of pace there, but if you've got half a yard in your head, which Fabinho has, then and you could argue Milner's a better defensive player than Alexander-Arnold as well at right back. So I think Robertson's someone I'm looking to shape my team around if I can afford him, which is not easy. And Zoph has made a fantastic case for Jota there. And what we were discussing earlier on about, I forgot about Keita. Going down injured as well. So that's another body they've lost from that central midfield. So yeah, maybe I am set on Jota after all that.
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit in terms of what I think what is happening at Liverpool. I'm sure Klopp is aware that he's got defensive problems. But I think what he's reverted back to solve those defensive problems is making sure that his team is going to score a lot of goals so that they don't get compromised in defense. So if anything, I think they're playing a little more aggressive attacking football, more than they used to, because he's aware that defense is sort of a makeshift defense at the moment. And when it comes to Jota's stats, for non-penalty XG plus XG per 90 amongst all the attackers this league, Jota is at number 3, behind only Kane and Mane. The most surprising stat is Salah is actually bottom for all 4 Liverpool attackers. Actually, I think that speaks more about Salah and the quality of the finisher that he is, because I think his numbers are only going to go up from where we generally see Salah as a stat padder, a stat hogger, taking a lot of shots, and I think that's going to continue. So my advice to everybody would be get 2 Liverpool attackers, because it seems like they seem like the most trustworthy attack, and there's a lot of talk about Jota being the new Foden. The prime difference here being is that Foden is more of a midfielder, Jota's more of a forward, so there's more upside there, and he's proven in the past in the Premier League where he scored goals. Second thing is he's very streaky. So we've known with Jota in the past that when he's on a hot run, you need to get in and then get out once his returns tend to dry up. So he's on a hot run right now. Get in, the stats are there, and if you're getting, I feel like he's on level with Salah at the moment in terms of the potency he offers as a Liverpool attacker. He's if you're sure that he's nailed, he's even a genuine captaincy option. In my eyes, the only reason you don't look at him as a captaincy option is because of that 6.5 million price tag.
Yeah.
And that's about it. So if he's playing limited minutes during midweek, get him, and I'd even consider captain him. But get Salah, get Jota back in your team as soon as possible, because they have a good run of fixtures. And then if those returns dry up, and if you feel like you need to hop off at 6.5 million, not like you're spending a lot of money. And and the third thing that I mentioned last time also is that even if he doesn't start, he's going to be Klopp's first attacking substitute, whether Mane, Salah, or Firmino go off. So I'm not too worried about going there. I'm probably getting him this week as well.
So let's move on now to the fixtures.
All right, first up, your boys versus Spurs. How do you see that going, Zoph?
See, Toby's injury is huge, I think, for Spurs, because I think Sanchez is out of favour. So Mourinho mentioned they're going to start the new guy, I think Rodon or whatever his name is. So that is really something that could make our potential for attack a lot better. I do worry about us conceding, because the way we press, I think it's still open to spaces on the counter attack, but we have a much better keeper now. We have much better centre back. So I think we can win this one, but I don't see us necessarily keeping a clean sheet. Maybe 2-1 Chelsea or maybe a 1-1.
But what's Lampard's record like against Mourinho?
Two played 2-1.
All right. Nice. This got that also in his favour. Neil, how do you see this game going?
It's a tough one, because this is why I'm considering a wildcard, because I've got 4 players across the 2 teams, and I think that's overkill really for a fixture as close as this. I think you'll see Mourinho adopt very, very similar tactics to what we saw at the weekend. And what do you think, Zoe? Do you think it'll be a 4-3-3 again from Chelsea? Do you think he's going to ever move away from that in the sort of the bigger fixtures, or is he now set on?
I think he's set on it primarily because he's getting the best out of Kante. This is the best I've seen Kante play in a long, long time, probably since the Antonio Conte days. So I don't think he'll mess around with that too much. He's got Mount playing in probably his best position. The question is really, I think, who plays alongside Mount? Is it going to be Jorginho or Kovacic? I think that's the only spot really up for grabs.
I could see this being a 0-0, I think this will be very, very tight. I think, what you said about Alderweireld is very, very pertinent, actually. That partnership had settled into something quite decent, actually, at the back for Spurs. So that is the only sort of ray of light I could see for Chelsea, because I think Tottenham's got the best defensive record in the Premier League now. I think they've got the lowest number of goals conceded. So
they were amazing against Man City. What a defensive performance. Even from Aurier, I thought they were super.
Yeah, that was the most surprising thing. He's made Aurier into a solid fullback. You have to give Mourinho credit for that.
Yeah, and he started against United as well, I think, in that away game. And we saw a lot of Son tracking back and covering him on the right. Probably the reason why he started there rather than the left.
Yeah. And I'm glad that he's not starting Bale, because I think that compromises on the way they play the game a little bit.
Yeah, he didn't have a good game against. Was it Brighton they were playing, or Burnley? I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, he just didn't look ready. And Sissoko in there, I think, is as important as Højbjerg. I mean, a lot's been made of Højbjerg, but Sissoko's engine in that midfield is significant. I think at the moment, as the start of the season with Winks alongside, it just didn't really work. So I could say it's been a scoreless draw.
All right. I think it's going to be a draw as well. But if I had to call a winner, I think it'd be Chelsea because of no Toby for Spurs. And I feel like Chelsea are a more sorted, in form, in sync attack at the moment compared to a Man City. So if I had to call a winner, it'd be that. And also, I feel like Thiago's experience in a big game like this is going to come through for them. I think he's going to be able to. Because you mentioned last time around as well that he's, very vocal in the defense. He's, telling people where to go, etc., etc. So I think that experience might come in handy against Spurs. So win by a goal for Chelsea for me.
Yep. Next, United Southampton. LR, you can start this one.
Tough to predict because I don't know if we are able to absorb pressure. The only thing that gives me confidence is right now Pogba isn't starting. The midfield double pivot that I spoke about last week, it's made us more solid in defense than normal. And I feel like in Bruno, Rashford, and Marshall, we have enough to win this game by a goal. I think we'll nick it by a goal. And I see Marshall scoring. He likes to score against Southampton. I remember 3 or 4 or 5 goals that he scored against the Saints. It's one of his more favorite opposition.
Neil?
Yeah, I think this is United. This is a good game for United. I think Southampton's been really good this season, and Vestergaard, who I thought it was been a bit of a joke amongst my team news predictions because I've just he's likened to a turning circle of a lorry because he's been really really good since he came in. I just think this is exactly the type of game where Martial and Rashford could prosper as much as Fernandes. The high line isn't as comically suicidal as it was in the early stages of the season, but it's part of their game. Part of their approach is to press from the front, and then everything follows from the back. So I think this is the kind of game where United will find space. And we saw last night. I mean, I'm a McCarthy owner, and he's racking up the saves against a very limited Wolves attack. So I do think this is going to be a Solskjaer special where he just keeps things ticking over. Every time his job's slightly at risk, he'll pull out an away result like this. So I think this could be like a 2-1, 3-1 United. I do think Southampton will score.
He's going to continue with this double pivot and not play Pogba until he finds someone to play on the right hand side in January. I'm hoping somebody gets somebody, because until then, this is the best way to keep it ticking over, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Utkarsh, any thoughts?
Oh, that I pretty much agree with you. I think it's a game built for counter-attack. I think Neil made a good point. The line isn't as high as it was before, but Southampton have been giving up a lot of chances of late. I think McCarthy has been in very good form. He's been bailing them out, even against Villa. Villa in the second half, I remember, had 6 or 7 shots on target, which McCarthy saved. So I see United winning this one.
All right. Next up, Brighton versus Liverpool. I'll kick us off on this one. I see it as a pretty comfortable win for Liverpool. I don't see Potter playing defensive in this game. I think he's going to play the way he's used to be. The only problem is, like Klopp mentioned, he's worried about the short turnaround time between the Champions League game and this game. But I think he's going to manage minutes, and his players are going to be sharp for the Brighton game. So win by 2 or 3 goals for Liverpool for me.
Agree. Anything to add, Neil?
Anything?
I think the one thing I'd be slightly concerned about from Liverpool's perspective is that Lamptey's out, which I think is, I think Potter will reshape his team based around that, and I just wonder how he'll approach it. I think probably Veltman coming in, but is he a wing back? I mean, he certainly doesn't offer the box-to-box thrust of Lamptey, so does he go with a more, regimented back four, and then build a more defensive setup around that? It's difficult because why would you change? Lamptey, Maupay and Welbeck formed such a good partnership at the weekend. Would you want to break that up and play it? Try and neuter your opponent? So, yeah, if Lamptey was there and as good as he is, then there'd be more space for the likes of Robertson to exploit. And I wonder how Potter's going to set up on the basis of that. But I completely agree. I think we saw last season, towards the end of last season, when Liverpool went and spanked Brighton in their own backyard, scored early, and I can see another comfortable win here. So yeah, and hence the reason why I'm looking to get Liverpool players straight back in on the wildcard.
Makes sense. Next one, Everton Leeds.
High scoring draw. Both teams aren't defending much at the moment. Both teams are doing really well in attack. I think Bamford owners have been hard done by. He should have had at least a couple of goals in the last few games. I think they amassed 25 or 26 shots
Yeah.
against Arsenal. That was staggering number. Uh, and then them as convinced as I've ever been about Bamford as a pick. High scoring draw for me.
I agree. 2-2 is what I've got down here.
Agrees. Yep.
Now the big one, City, Burnley.
Huh. I'm hoping they find their form. I'm hoping they find their mojo. The good thing is that I like that Sterling didn't start against Spurs, and I think that didn't work for City clearly. I fully expect him to start in both the home games that are coming now. Uh, City have done well against them previously, but I'm not as confident as I was. There's a lot of you mentioned to me, Zoph, that there's a lot of talk about journalists saying that they should revert back to having their wingers on their natural side rather than the inverted winger play that they're having at the moment. But we don't know what Pep is up to or what he's going to do. Still, will have enough in their armory to beat Burnley by a couple of goals.
But I think I agree with you. I think it'll be a couple of goals, but I don't see it being 5 or 6 because Burnley, I think, have found the defensive mojo, and people will point to the game right after the restart. But I think Burnley was still getting their feedback. Now I think they've got some of defensive form. They were pretty solid yesterday against Palace, so I think probably a 2-0. That's what
Yeah,
I'd
this
go
this
for.
is this is a regular occurrence with Burnley where they start a season in a bit of a disarray.
Yeah.
They did last season. They did it after the restart as well. They did at the start of this season. Part of that was personnel, but I think once they're a rhythm team. Once they've got me and Tarkowski back, both the first choice fullbacks are available. They've got a decent centre midfield partnership now. Brownhill and Westwood. And they've even got orthodox winners back as well. So I agree with Zofa's analysis there. I think it'll be a comfortable win without it being the hammering of previous seasons. I think this may be the first step towards getting Man City back to that rhythm we've seen in the past. I think this may be the stepping stone onto greater things. But yeah, I think probably a 2-3-0.
All right.
Let's just touch on the one more fixture I think people are looking at for captaincy this week: Leicester versus Fulham. Do you guys think Vardy is a standout captain pick this week versus somebody like a De Bruyne or a Sterling?
Yeah, he's a good captaincy option. Vardy, he's a flat track bully. He likes playing against his teams, and he tends to score a lot of his goals against such opposition. So I wouldn't be surprised to get a goal or two, to see him get a goal or
So
two.
there was a piece on The Athletic about Leicester's new approach, especially versus teams that are now playing deeper. Now, when more teams are realizing the deeper you play, the less space Vardy is going to get to counter attack. So Rodgers has changed his game up a little bit. He's having Vardy drop in a lot of deeper link-up play, and what that's done is, it's increased Vardy's assist potential. You look at his key passes, I think he's played 5 or 6 key passes in the last 3-4 games, which is not very Vardy usually. And B, he's making his runs a lot more central rather than drifting out wide to trying to find that space. So I think it's a better fixture, I think, than it looks. A lot of people, they're like, oh, maybe Leicester can't do it against deep defenses. I think they can.
I don't even think Fulham is a very deep defense.
That's
They like
also
to sit
true.
around with-
Yeah.
They've been playing a fair bit. They like to stamp their authority on the game as well. I thought they had a really good second half against Everton. They were very close to pulling off at least a draw there. So that's one of the reasons, because Fulham like to stamp their authority on the game as well. Why I fancy Vardy. But good point you mentioned, because whenever Vardy does drift in, his crossing from either side has been pretty accurate. He's been able to find the guy in the center with that ball.
So that's something.
Neale, anything to add in you?
Yeah, I think Fulham's defence as well. They are Parker insists, a bit like Arsenal, insists on them playing out from the back. I mean, they were top of all kind of passing statistics last season. You've seen the likes of I think Ream are play Sky as well, and a lot of their players get passing bonus because they complete so many passes every game. And I could see Leicester capitalising on that. Vardy is decent. He knows when to press now. He's quite an intelligent presser. He doesn't do it all the time. He doesn't hair after every ball, but I could see him nicking possession quite high up the pitch, and as Fulham are trying to play out from the back, which is the only way they know under Parker. So I think this is a good game for a number of reasons for Leicester.
Nice, good point.
Right, let's just quickly move on to our differentials. So LR, I see you've gone with Marshall. Will you tell us why?
Because he likes playing against that team. It's just something I'm aware of as a United fan, so I fancy him this game. 3.9% owned.
I've gone with Hoolahan. I think he's going to come in place of Barkley next game. I think we mentioned earlier that Grealish was moved central because he could not track back Lamptey at all, so that's probably something tactical that Smith will look to change this game. And Hourihane has decent set piece threat. I really like what he does with his free kicks, corners. I think he can nick something there.
I was surprised to see Traore pull Rank over Grealish when it came to
On the
set
corners,
pieces.
and I was quite surprised to. That's the one thing I saw as a silver lining. Maybe when Barkley went out, them, or maybe Grealish is going to take some set pieces now, but turned out not to be the case. So Neil, you've gone for Castagna. Could you tell us why?
Yeah, with the obvious caveat that he's got a yellow flag on his name in FPL. He was due back last week, but Rodgers confirmed after the game that he sort of had a mild repercussion of it, and they weren't going to risk him. But he's expecting him back this week, so keep tabs on the press conferences to ensure that. But I think if he is back, then he's a great option for this week and the next four. I think he's that wing back system that they're now playing obviously allows him to get up. We've seen a lot in the early weeks of the season that whether it be Justin on one side, Castagna on the other, it's not so much assist potential as goal threat as well, because they make those diagonal runs in from almost like Doherty, underlapping runs into the sort of 6-yard box areas.
Because they're inverted, right? They also play the inverted system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we saw how susceptible Fulham were at the weekend to balls across from the left, which is what Dini was doing, and obviously Castagna running in from the right. I could see him if he starts and if he's fit, which is of course are the big ifs. Then not just clean sheet potential, but potential attacking threat as well.
I think that's a great pick. So before we jump into the Q&A, we're just going to discuss our teams. LR, you're up first.
All right, I'll just read up my team for the benefit of the listeners. In defense, I have Martinez as my keeper. I have Chilwell, Luke Ayling, and Matty Target. I've got De Bruyne, Sterling, who's got the armband at the moment, Grealish, and Podence. I've got Werner, Kane, and Calvert-Lewin up front. I have one free transfer, but I'm thinking of definitely getting a Liverpool attacker. My routes to a Liverpool attacker are selling either Kane or Werner and downgrading that forward to Bamford, who I'm pretty confident about as a pick, and either upgrading Grealish to Salah or Podence to Jota. I'm leaning towards upgrading Podence to Jota at the moment because I'm just done with Podence as a pick. The only reason I might not do something like this is if Aguero seduces me. I just want to put that out there.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just bring up my team up now. So I've got Martinez in goal, Diaz, Cancelo, and Chilwell in defense, Fernandes, De Bruyne, Ziyech, and Grealish in midfield, Vardy as my captain, Watkins, and Calvert-Lewin with Kufal at first sub. So
Good.
And are you looking to save after the
I don't know.
wildcard?
It all depends on how the teams pan out. I'm possibly now Salah has to come in at some point for Fernandes. The initial plan was to downgrade DCL to fund it, so I'm not sure I'm going to do that anymore. I might downgrade Ziyech to Jota, which allows me to fund that. So that's something I'm looking at depending on minutes.
I like that double switch that you're thinking of. I think Salah and Jota is better than Fernandes and Ziyech.
Yeah, so Ziyech's been good. I think Ziyech's going to create a lot, but I think like James, there is going to be a little bit of where he's going to assist the assister, playing the hockey assist. So, and he lost corner duties to Mount. I was pretty surprised for that against Newcastle also.
That seems to be a common thing, is it? With Chelsea, I've noticed so far that it seems to be a different corner take every 3 or 4 game weeks. I've seen James taking a lot early in the season. Chilwell was on them as well. Mount's been in and out. Ziyech as well, and it seems to be. I don't know if is this a regular thing? Is this a thing Lampard does where he just needs to keep position guessing?
I don't know. I think we're still finding out because we're doing a lot of different things with set pieces. Now, if you remember the first goal we scored, it was not really a cross into the box. It's something where they did that interplay and Mount charged inside. That's not something Ziyech would be very good at doing. So yeah. I think Mount maybe keeps that option open where he can play in short and he's more mobile, can charge inside. So that's probably something behind that. So now we have your team, Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Just walk us through it, please.
So I can't actually see your screen so far. Is it the one I've got now? Is it Gameweek 9?
So I'll just read it out. I've got it up here. I'll just read it out. It's McCarthy, Dean, Chilwell, and Kilman. Grealish, Fernandes, Bowen, Son, Kane, Mitrovic, and Werner. So I'm guessing you're probably going to bring Justin in for Kilman at least.
That's absolutely spot on. Yeah, I'm looking at my Gameweek 10 setup now. That's exactly the change I've made. I think otherwise at the moment it's the same as was. Now obviously there's fires to fight there if I was not using my wild card, and my transfers would be Mitrovic to Calvert-Lewin, should have been done long ago, and then maybe for a hit of Werner Vardy. Now I've got my wild card intact, and I was set on playing it this week. I've just got to think this one through very carefully. Part of the reason I'm doubting it is I'm half wondering whether I can save it for sort of 16 and start planning game week 18 and double game week 19, but then you're sacrificing a big chunk of fixtures over December. And I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm sort of drifting towards that. Team's still competitive for game week 10, with the exception of Mitrovic. I've got a wild card draft here. I can talk you through that, and maybe you can rip that apart.
Sure.
Let me just bring that up. So I stuck McCarthy in goal. I know their fixtures aren't fantastic, but I liked what Simon Marsh did. I read his article, and he's got the McCarthy and Forster double up. So Forster's 4 million, and you know if McCarthy's not going to play, that he's going to go straight in because Angus Gunn has left the club on loan. And their fixtures aren't bad, I don't think. In the short term, longer term, not so good. So they've got Brighton, Sheffield United, and Arsenal after this weekend, which I think's all right. I think Arsenal, as we discussed, have got a very, very limited attack at the moment, and Brighton and Sheffield United limited front men, I think we can say. Even United, you could see him racking up the save points as he did last night. Defence, I've still got Chilwell, unsurprisingly. I've still got Justin, and I've still got Kilman. I've added Robertson and Lewis. Now, as I said earlier, Robertson's someone I'm trying to build my defence around, given the longer term fixtures. Lewis, we discussed Newcastle at length, and I won't go into that anymore. But for 4.3 million, given the rises that the likes of Kilman and Mitchell have had, then he's one of the cheapest starting defenders at the moment. Midfield, I've downgraded Bowen to Souček, and I've brought in De Bruyne and Jota. So I've kept Fernandes and Grealish for now. Grealish is going nowhere. Fernandes might be going somewhere, potentially to Salah. And then my front line is, at the moment, completely changed. So it's Vardy, Calvert-Lewin and Antonio. But Antonio is obviously... I'm waiting on news from Moyes, and I think that might be a transfer booking later on down the line, because I think their fixtures are better from game week 15. You could argue game week 12 as well, and you could view the next 2 weeks as an audition period for Antonio to see where his fitness levels are like, because we obviously there's that long-term concern about his hamstrings. He kind of assuaged the fears after lockdown. He strung together loads of starts in a row. He wasn't being rested for any of those games that West Ham had. He's playing twice a week. And we thought, he's finally over that those chronic hamstring injuries, but of course he's pulled out again recently. He is back in training, so we'll see where he is for the weekend. I do like him at his price. I mean, 6.2 for a forward who's proven to be a reliable, not just goal scorer, but someone who's consistently getting quality chances. And I think West Ham's attack has suffered when he's been out. I know Alaa scored at the weekend, but they're just not the same team without Antonio Wayne. I think Bowen and Fournal suffer a bit as well. So that's my team at the moment. I don't know. Feel free to shred it to pieces, lads, if you want. But if there's any way you think I can improve on that.
No, I like it, but I don't think necessarily your team needs a wildcard. It would be an aggressive move to play it, but then again, you never know how Son and Kane are going to perform. I'd probably just ship out Mitrovic, and I don't even think you necessarily need to shift Werner out for Vardy. Maybe maybe get in another captain option somewhere.
I mean, if he's downgrade, if at all, you can downgrade Mitrovic to a Bamford or Antonio, and you can fund Salah through that. Then you have
Mitrovic is cheaper than them now, so
okay, all right. You need to get Salah somehow, and the Bowen downgrade also does it.
Bowen to Souček is actually a move I actually quite like. I think Souček offers just as much as Bowen does.
I do see the upside in pulling the trigger also. I think it's going to be a difficult decision right until the game week 19 deadline for you, because there's so many good options. So whenever you are wildcarding, you're going to remove some good options out of your team. I was just reading Karam Taser's.
Yeah, so
the guy lost 30 or 40 points on his wildcard.
Yeah,
I mean that's pretty brutal. So it's never going to be easy, that decision. But what advice I can give you and listeners is, if you are holding on to your wildcard, putting it in the back pocket, you can bring out a little bit of reckless Neale back for the next 2, 3, 4 game weeks, because I feel like having the wildcard so late into the season, it enables risk taking as a manager, because you always have a get out of jail card free. So if at all you choose to not play it, I think you can play a little bit aggressively and in a slightly risky way if you felt like to.
Yep, I totally agree with that. So I think Jota fits the bill for the
Yeah,
transfer you should look at. Right.
yeah.
Let's move on to the Q&A.
All right. Let's move to Q&A. We'll do a quick run. First questions for you, Zoph. It's from FPL Flair. Vardy's non-penalty XG has been pretty lackluster. How do you envision him faring in this very generous run? Is he worth it over a KDB or a Sterling? First of all, yeah, you have the stat. Tell us.
Yeah, so over the last four, Vardy's non-pen XG is 2.4. He has only two more strikers or more. That's Firmino at 3.02 and Bamford at 4.72. So they're not really very lackluster stats per se. So he's a very good pick now. Is he worth it over, say, a KDB or Sterling? I don't really know because I'd like to think they have a higher ceiling. Like, if KDB and Sterling, they hit on their day, I could see them going for 15, 16. Vardy, I still see potentially as a brace, a goal and assist, 10 to 12 point guy. But you'd argue that Vardy has shown more than the other two have. So it depends on your risk potential, like, what your
Yeah.
risk tolerance is.
Due to their team winning more penalties. I'll just add that caveat. Next question is from Chris Tan FPL. I'll take this one. Talk to me about Foden. Exercise patience with that fixture run or easy switch to Jota, assuming both are fine post UCL. I feel like I got rid of Foden last week, and I feel like between the two, if you're looking at an apples to apples comparison, I feel like Jota is a better option compared to Foden because Foden has more competition in his place as well in terms of 3 or 4 options who could play on the wing or in center midfield. Jota is in the first team at the moment. He's a striker. He's more direct, and he's going to be he's competing for only one spot in the sense that if Liverpool do play 4-3-3, he's the next best option, which is not the case in terms of Man City where there are more options. So I like Jota more as an option compared to Foden. He's the more superior option in my opinion.
Agree.
All right. Next question is for you, Neil. It's from FPL Gens. Should we be thinking about selling Wolves defenders for Man City defenders this week? Arsenal can't score, so it looks like a good fixture for Wolves. But fixtures get tough after that in MCI. Man City should have a good chance to start a run of clean sheets against Burnley. Would you recommend that switch?
Yeah, I suppose it depends who your Wolves defender is. I think if it's someone like Semedo or one of the more expensive options like Lee, then I think it makes sense because while there is an excellent chance of a clean sheet this weekend, I think if you were medium term planning or if you were you got the luxury of making a transfer for planning further down the line, then it makes sense to do that switch right now. I'm not sure about Cancelo. I know he's part of their first choice back four now. I think unquestionably, but I think they've got Mendy and Zinchenko are near in fitness or certainly around about the start of the squad. So they've got Champions League and UEFA League Cup involvement as well. I could see them rotate a bit. I think Diaz would be my pick. I've got him in the Sky game. I think with Wolves, I think if you got Kilman, I'm possibly thinking of keeping him, even though they've got this upcoming run. I wouldn't be averse to playing him this weekend. Actually, I think if you need to fight fires elsewhere, I wouldn't make it a priority transfer. I think they've Arsenal's attack is poorly at the moment, and Wolves, yes, they looked a bit wobbly last night because they went to a back four. I don't expect him to repeat that next week. I think he's probably seen enough of that. It was through necessity because Cody was out and Saiss as well. I think he didn't want to leave Neves and Moutinho as a midfield too, so hence he played Dendoncker in there as well. So I if I own Kilman, which I do, I'd probably keep him and consider playing him this week. With Semedo, I think attacking returns, which is part of the reason you brought him in the first place, there just aren't going to be that many opportunities over the next 6-7 weeks. And this Arsenal game is really the last hurrah. So yeah, I think if you were a medium-term planner, then now is the time to move for City.
All right, agree. Next question is for you, Zoph. It's from FPL Hokage. It looks like Tammy has nailed down his spot as striker. Is he a better pick than Timo, seeing as he's supplied by the same team? Not got pens, but you can spend the 2.3 elsewhere, and he's been pretty decent in the last 3 Premier League and Champions League. Not as explosive, however.
So Abraham has had just one big chance over the last 4 game weeks. Werner has had 5. But Abraham has created 8 chances over that period, more than any other forward. So you can see that the kind of role that Abraham is playing is almost similar to a Firmino role. So it's like a question, would you rather have a Firmino or would you rather have a Mane or Salah? You'd always go for the guy who's has a higher ceiling. And with penalties in his locker, I think it's easily Werner.
All right. Just a little selfish question again to you, Zoph. I mean, I need to drop one of Kane or Werner at the moment. Who would you recommend selling?
Heart says sell Kane, head says sell Werner.
All right. Okay. I'll take that answer. I'm sure we're going to be discussing this during the week as well. Next questions for you, Neale, is from FPL Croat. Thanks for answering my question in the last pod. It was really helpful. My question now is a dilemma I think a lot of FPL managers have, which is who to keep out of Kane and Son, considering the replacements would probably be either KDB or Vardy. What do you think, Neale?
Well, it's a dilemma I'm having as well. I think I'd probably sell Kane sooner than Son, but I'd rather buy KDB than Vardy. So different positions, of course. I do think I've covered a lot of this already. I think in this podcast, I think the discussion about Kane, as you mentioned, you made a really good point there, Neale, about the Palace and Arsenal games potentially being more Kane games. But longer term, I think Son could prosper. What you will have with Kane, he's actually more nailed, you'd think, over Christmas than even Vardy. I mean, we saw Vardy rested a bit last season because he's aging limbs and that chronic hip problem he's got. It takes a few days to recover. So I could see him actually, once upon a time, he was a nailed presence. I think he could get a rest or two when the fixtures get congested. So I think I'd prefer, obviously, rotation's always a risk with City as well. I'd prefer KDB out of him and Vardy. But I think I'd drop Kane over Son because I think partly due to the price difference as well, and that goes a long way to fund another moves.
All right. Next question's from Alon Shamir. I'll take this one. He's asking who's the better value for money: Chilwell, James, Cresswell, Kufal, Konsa, and Cancelo. It's a pretty easy question. I think Chilwell is the best defender in the game at the moment, so you have to go for him. But I actually want to ask you now, Zoph, has your opinion changed on James? Is he more nailed than we thought was?
Yes, and I think a lot has changed since we last discussed. There are two things primarily. One is the signing of Thiago Silva has brought that leadership similar to what Aspie used to provide. So at least that has been substituted. And B, the relationship with Ziyech. I think there was a lot of Lampard talked about how he wants to play Reece James and Ziyech together. They complement each other really well. So I do think James is a lot more nailed than he was 3-4 weeks ago.
He's a viable pick now, yeah?
I think so.
Do you see Lampard turning to Aspie in any of the forthcoming games, given that he's going to be up against Son possibly next week, and then Aubameyang after that, Zaha possibly in between as well? Like very good left-sided attackers. Do you think would he turn to? You probably watch more the Chelsea than I do. Is obviously Thiago being alongside James is helping him, but his defensive aptitude in itself is that improving? Do you think
that has also improved? That is the next point I make now. In terms of pace, Aspie is a little bit short on pace compared to Reece James, and Reece James is also very physical. He's very strong. So I think defensively, James has improved a lot, and so I really don't know when he would necessarily play Aspie. Maybe he's going to play Aspie in the Champions League, but James right now it looks like he's a clear choice in that position.
All right. Okay. Next question is from Aswin. He's asking, will Jesus get more minutes than Aguero in the league? KDB and Sterling are just not passing the eye test, so will that make Jesus a more attractive City asset? My thinking with both the City strikers at the moment, I don't think Gabriel Jesus is an option at the moment because Aguero is almost fit. I expect him to start one of the next two home games while he's building his fitness. The only way you need to think of them as an option is a short-term 1 or 2 week captaincy punt if you're going there. Outside of that, I don't see any other logical explanation for those two picks. You have to go for the more nailed KDB or Sterling. All right. Next question for you, Zoph. It's from WCSR99. In general, how many game weeks do you give a player before making a decision on them? Example for now, Rashford, who looked a bit off the pace. Is there a sample size you feel comfortable with?
So it differs, I think, for buying a player and for selling a player. Now, for buying a player, I definitely I don't make my decision on 1 week. A good rule I have is that if that player hadn't hauled on that particular week, would I still be interested in buying him? I think so. Probably for attackers, at least 2 weeks, but I would like to see obviously underlying stats which are sustainable. Now, in terms of players to sell, usually I go for a sample size of 3 matches. If a player is going to return once in every 3 matches, and this obviously differs for the premium players versus the budget players. Somebody at 6 million, I'd be okay with even a return once every 3 weeks. But again, it comes back to underlying stats. if you're like the Che Adams, you're posting positive underlying stats, I'd be more keen on keeping than not.
All right. Next question is for you, Neil. It's from Stadium of Sports. With the Barkley injury, Grealish did not look as dangerous against Brighton. Could we see him slightly fall to the levels of last season? Is it wise to move him to a Jota, Ziyech, James Rodriguez in the short term?
I wouldn't do that move. I think those other players you mentioned are great options, but I wouldn't see Grealish as the mate weight. He's going nowhere from my wildcard team for now. I think we were discussing this a bit off air where I think our Brighton game we can write off a tiny bit. It was horses for courses. I think when Bartley went off, and because of the Joy Lamptey was getting down that right flank, Grealish was moved inside. I think because they wanted someone like Trezeguet to cover Lamptey's runs down that right, and Grealish just wasn't as effective in the centre. So it remains to be seen what Smith does this weekend if he brings in Hourihane as Zoph suggesting there. But looking forward, I mean, Kufal, Keo, Smedo, Barsley, Furlong, Klein, those right backs who Grealish is up against in the next 6 games, they aren't going to offer the threat that Lamptey is. Maybe Semedo, but so I can't see Villa shaping their attack around an opposition right back's strengths. Yeah. And I think he's just for that price. I mean, I got him at 7, and part of the reason obviously of course values are tied in that, but. Last 4 game weeks, if you think there's any, I think Villa will tail off. I think undoubtedly they will do that. They're not going to be up there the rest of the season. But last 4 game weeks, I mean, he's top for big chances created or joint top. 3rd among, this is all players, not just midfielders. 3rd for shots in the box, top for penalty box touches. So I think he's still proven enough. I think 1 game in special circumstances against Brighton isn't enough for me to get rid of him. And I think he's going to be in for Christmas for me. I think he's going nowhere.
Yeah. Not that I recommend selling Grealish, but I do expect his numbers to tail off a little because the conversation and what we saw was that Barkley occupied a defender or 2 as well, which took a little focus off Grealish and left some space for him. Otherwise, if Barkley is not in that team, Grealish is the primary threat that exists in the Aston Villa team. So I do see teams doubling or tripling up on Grealish, which is what Brighton also did, in my opinion. So that is the only slight caveat that I'd like to add to what you mentioned.
He's back in 2 weeks, so Grealish, from what the latest reports, Barkley's only expected to be out for 2 weeks, max 3.
All right. Okay, next question is for you, Zoph. It's from Pritesh Shetty. With James not returning in the past few weeks, does it make sense to switch to Ziyech or over James? Are there any other better midfield options to own over these 2 in the same price range as per underlying numbers?
So I would stick with James at least this weekend. I think on paper, home to Leeds is a better fixture than home to Spurs for Ziyech. So, but I would still recommend, I think, now Jota over Ziyech, having watched. I think Jota is so much more direct, so much more closer to goal. Ziyech can have a great game, assist, maybe pick up 1 assist or 2, but he had 0 penalty box touches against Newcastle. I know he was the one Werner was passing to, but ultimately he wasn't really in the box as much. And I think the potential that Jota offers in terms of a ceiling of like 15, 16, 20 points, I don't think Ziyech can offer that.
All right. The next question is from No Look FPL. I think, Neil, you and me can both take this one. Best budget forward to own long term, next 10 game weeks or so. Watkins, Bamford, Antonio, Che Adams, etc. Who do you like the most, Neil?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, if I could be sure of Antonio's fitness, I think I prefer him over the others. Bamford is a funny one because last season his conversion rate, and this has been widely documented, it was pretty poor. I mean, he scored from. He had the top for shots in the Championship, and his conversion rate was down to like 11%, which is terrible, really, for the Championship. And obviously, when you're making a step up, but he's confounded expectations this season. I think his conversion rate is about 20%, which isn't astronomical, and it isn't a rate where you'd say, well, that's unsustainable. If you were scoring with 50% of your chances, then you'd say, well, that's not going to last. 1 in 5, it doesn't sound like too unrealistic an expectation for him to continue what he's doing now. And Leeds are creating a lot of chances.
The chances he's missing, he's not really scuffing them. I think they've been fairly good saves by the keeper as well.
Well, he hit the post at the weekend as well. He could easily have crept in. So I was dismissive of his prospect at the start of the season. I was almost sneery about people who went for him, thinking, you're not looking really deeply into it. But I've been made to eat my words. And yeah, I think I'm not looking at him right now, although Everton is a great fixture. But I will be looking at him potentially from Gameweek 12. If I'm thinking of downgrading Calvert-Lewin at that point, and then freeing up money for a premium midfielder upgrade. So I do like Bamford, actually. I think their fixtures are good. Watkins, I think, again, what I said about Villa, I'm not sure whether their sort of that early season bubble is sustainable. And I think obviously with he is on pens, which is that is in his favour, and their fixtures are pretty good as well. But I think I'm just loath to do the double up. I think it depends if you got Grealish already. I think we saw last week. I think Villa are so hot and cold that I'm just not in favour of doubling up on Villa, which is probably more reflective of my managerial approach, spreading the risk. But there's no doubt he's got good fixtures as well.
All right. For me, Bamford is the clear best option in the price bracket, and I've stopped looking at fixtures for Leeds because, like I mentioned last week as well, they outpossessed the caliber of teams like Liverpool and Man City. They had 65 to 70% possession against teams like Arsenal. They had 25 shots against teams like Arsenal. In the last 6 game weeks, Bamford is top in the league for shots in the box, shots on target, big chances, XG non-penalty, and XGI amongst all attackers. So that just there's a clear argument in his favor, and in my opinion, he's emerging as one of the best value picks in the game at the moment. He just seems like a set and forget option at the moment to me. So I'm looking to get him as soon as possible. He's the clear standout option in the bracket for me personally.
Makes sense.
I think that's it from our end for this pod. Thank you so much, Neale, for taking the time out and talking to us and letting us know about your past and letting the listeners know a little bit more about you. Any last words, Neale?
No, I just again want to thank you two for having me on, because it's one of the elite podcasts now, I think, and amongst the FPL community. So I usually when I'm talking to my friends outside of FPL, I can hold my own. It's daunting to be in the company of such two brilliant managers. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I hope
it was our pleasure.
Hope to see you again soon.
Any last words, Zoph?
Oh, nothing else. Just the usual. Like and subscribe, everyone. So the more you like and subscribe, the more views we get. So ways of supporting the podcast, please do go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
See you on the other side.